too. I was gonna say, you got it, Danny?
Yeah.
Hey, Peter.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Larry.
Happy birthday.
Enjoy.
I know my birthday's over though.
Hey, Otto.
Hello. Sing
How's
happy
everybody
birthday.
doing?
Yeah. I know.
Good.
All right.
Hey, Peter's here.
Yeah, I saw Peter. Hey, Peter. How are you?
It's easy, USA.
Okay, there you go, Peter. Oops. Is that okay, sweetie, right there?
All right, everybody behave. William's joining us.
William here.
I'll come back.
Raymond. I'm going to have to talk really fast.
Eat lunch, chocolate.
And your friend says they don't.
Chocolate.
Your video not working?
Yeah.
You, or would you rather see it in?
Speak out for people who can't speak up for themselves. Well, it was.
All right.
Hi, Deb.
Hey.
Break is not on.
I see you.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Coleman is here.
Hey, William.
Did it
I
work?
just told everybody we have to behave, that you're on the
I'll bounce off early and you can misbehave. Larry on there.
Yeah.
Your friend.
What's up, buddy?
What up, William?
Hey, Celia.
All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and start. If anybody tries to join and I need to admit them, hopefully I will see them and remember to do that. So thank y'all for joining. So I'm going to do a thing on the Cayman Islands, partly because I lived in the Cayman Islands for 2 years, but also that's where I met my wife, and her family still lives there. So we get to periodically go down and visit with them and do some, see some cool stuff there. So I tell you what, since I'm going to have to rush through this, to start with, I'm going to mute everybody. And then at the end, hopefully there's time for questions and I'll unmute and people.
Good idea. Maybe
So,
can you turn your volume up a little bit, Mike? The microphone volume? I've got my speaker volume all the way up. I'm having a little hard time hearing it.
Audio setting, input level. I can turn it up a little bit.
Okay.
Well, it's automatically adjusting.
Oh, you can take that check mark away from
No,
automatically.
I know. I turned it up.
Good. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, now mute everybody.
Yes. So everybody is muted. And I'm going to try something that this is the first time I've kind of done it like this. So Google Earth is a kind of a cool thing if you've not seen it before. And I found out it is satellite kind of maps, pictures of the whole world. But I found you can create things. So we are going to go through the Cayman Islands one at a time. So we will start. Oops. Oh, I know what sorry. Present. That's what I needed to do. So starting here in Richmond. And let me do that just so you see more. Actually, I'm going to hide myself even, so it hides even less. So going from Richmond We're going to fly down to the Cayman Islands, which is in the Caribbean. Usually when people talk about the Cayman Islands, they're really just talking about one island, which is the island of Grand Cayman, and that is how they say it in the Cayman Islands. Cayman, not Cayman. And Grand Cayman is the largest, but it is one of 3 islands, the other 2 being Little Cayman and Cayman Brac. The Cayman Islands are British territories, and there's about 65,000 people who live in the Cayman Islands. 63,000 of them live in Grand Cayman. There's about 2,000 or so in Cayman Brac, and about 200 who live in Little Cayman. Just kind of a little fun fact, because you can see the ocean floor in Google Earth as well. The Cayman Trench runs right off the coast of the Cayman Islands, and it is the deepest part of the Caribbean Sea. So just real quickly, so you at least know a little bit about the other 2 islands. Cayman Brac is about 12 miles long and 1.5 miles or so wide at its widest. It is Cayman, the word Brac is a Gaelic word meaning bluff, and you can see here why I got that name, that the island jets up on the eastern end. The western end is kind of flat, but the eastern end is a 140-foot bluff. And of course, anytime there's that kind of rock wall, rock climbers are going to figure out that it's there and start climbing. Both of my kids who are climbers neither one have been there yet, but have talked about wanting to do it. The Cayman Islands are probably known more for water sports, and Little Cayman is kind of one of the best places for that. Little Cayman is only about 10 miles long, and it's almost 1 mile wide at its widest. There's only about 200 people there. Most of the people who go there are visitors, and they are there for some resorts. And while all 3 islands have great diving, Little Cayman is known to have the most pristine diving because there's fewer people, and the coral is just in much better shape. So most of our trip here will be in Grand Cayman. And so when you get to the Cayman Islands, you fly into Owen Roberts Airport. And as you see here, it ends, the airport or runway ends right here into the what they call North Sound. So if the plane should overshoot it, you're going to get wet. You still have to come off of planes. I was excited to see that they have a ramp so that it is accessible now, because before, every time we'd been, you had to walk downstairs to get on and off of a plane in Cayman. They don't have the little things that go straight into the terminal like most of the airports do, and honestly, most of the rest of the world. But I think they're working on that. So the 2 big industries in the Cayman Islands are tourism and banking and offshore businesses. As I said, there's around 65,000 residents in the Cayman Islands. There's over 100,000 businesses registered in the Cayman Islands. So there's more businesses technically than there are people. Most of those businesses are just a little thing hanging in a lawyer's office somewhere. The other thing that usually you hear about with the Cayman Islands is banking. It's one of the largest banking centers in the world, especially being a small island. And if you watch any crime shows, often they talk about, criminals trying to hide their money in the Cayman Islands. And I know the Cayman Islands is doing their most to keep the illegal money out, but they do have some tax havens that are legal, that bring in a lot of people. So for the tourist, the big thing that people like to go to is the beach, and that's the biggest draw. I'm going to come out here. So this strand of beach is called 7 Mile Beach. Is actually not quite 7 miles long, but it's a beautiful white beach. This side of the island is almost always, the water is calm, beautiful clear water, kind of like a swimming pool almost that you see. Lots of water sports. You see one of those, I think it's called a jet board or something like that, where they shoot the water out and fly around. And so there's a lot of hotels, condominiums, and things like that along there. This is looking out from one that we got to stay at years ago when we went. So the pictures you're going to see today are from several different trips that our family have made to the Cayman Islands. I don't unfortunately have any pictures from when I lived there. I was there from 1984 to 86, and digital cameras weren't really much available back then. And I have not scanned many of those pictures. So these are pictures from a trip in 2003, and then some more recent trips in 2016, 2018, and then last year in 2019. So as you can imagine, this is here on this side is our son, Jonathan. He's now 25, but back then I think I've remembered he would have been about 8 years old. Made a friend and has always liked to build something big, and so made this really cool sand castle. Our daughter, who was 6 at the time, really loved the fact that Stephanie's brother and sister were dog sitting this cute little Westie, and she had fun with that. Stephanie's natural environment is the beach, and so here is Stephanie in her natural environment. And then looking, beautiful sunrise, well, sunsets, we'll talk, sunrises are beautiful too, but they're on the other side of the island. A lot of diving and snorkeling whenever I've gone. When I lived there, I did some diving, but in the trips since then, I've just been able to snorkel. And on that trip back then, when Jonathan was 8, he had a great time snorkeling as well. So you see all kinds of strange fish there. There are lobsters there. This is a spiny lobster. They don't have the big claws like the ones that you usually see here, but they still taste good if you can get them. Although, because they're overfished, there's really strict limits on where you can catch them and when you can catch them. So also, because I had more 7 Mile Beach pictures than I could have at one time. So back in 2018, so this is our daughter more recently, in 2018, when she and her boyfriend Sven graduated, and this is our daughter Carrie, and this is her boyfriend Sven, their graduation present was we took them to the Cayman Islands for about 2 weeks. And so this is where, near where we were staying, because it was for their graduation, we were staying close to the beach. There was a kind of outdoor patio restaurant right next to us. And so this is Stephanie's mom and Stephanie's sister, and here's Stephanie. And we got to enjoy a couple of lunches with them there. One of the things that happened apparently not long after I left in 1986 was that someone released some green iguanas. There's a native blue iguana in the Cayman Islands. It's actually quite endangered and rare and very, very unusual to see. But apparently after about 1986, someone let some of these green iguanas go, and they basically took over the island, became a terribly problematic invasive species. They grow up to, some of these were like 5 feet long from their nose to the tip of their tail. They had to put a lot of these metal bands on things because they were climbing trees, they were climbing onto power lines and causing problems. They were eating the few things that were being grown on the island. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Nope, that was all that. So from going, and we're kind of going to go around the island. From there, we're going to go up to the area of West Bay. And obviously the western side of the island is the side where the sun sets, and so there's lots of beautiful places to see sunsets. This was an outdoor patio next to another restaurant that we really enjoyed. It obviously had one of the best views of any restaurant I've ever been in, and really, really enjoyed it. But Stephanie's brother and sister-in-law live in the West Bay area, and so on a trip where just Stephanie and I went, we stayed with them, and this is them in their home. If you happen to be there, I think it's in May and early June, the Royal Ponciana trees are blooming, and they're quite striking. They're one of the few trees on the island that actually drop their leaves during the winter, during the dry season, but it's always warm there. Actually, it's always hot there. But when the leaves come back out, like many of the trees here, they bloom and just cover lots of places with this bright red flower. Again, these iguanas, this is in his brother and sister-in-law's backyard. And they had talked about this was in 2016, how many they had killed the year before, and they were still all over the place. We were quite amazed when we went back in 2019 that we saw hardly any after seeing them everywhere. And they had really stepped up the eradication effort to where they had killed over 1 million of these green iguanas, the invasive species, to where there's still some around, but they're much more manageable and not causing near the destruction that they were. Everywhere you go around the island, there are places to dive and snorkel. And so this is just a head of coral on one of the places. This is another sunset at that restaurant. And that restaurant also happened to be right next to a dive shop. And so as you were eating, divers might be coming in and out of the water, which was kind of fun to watch. I was jealous that I didn't have a chance to go diving. West Bay is also where the 7 Mile Beach ends. 7 Mile Beach ends right at the beginning of West Bay, and this is kind of the end of it here at this boat ramp. And then that's looking back the other way. So close by there is the turtle farm. Christopher Columbus went by the Cayman Islands on one of his voyages, and he called them Las Tortugas, which means turtles, because the islands were surrounded by turtles. And there were lots and lots of turtles. They're not quite as plentiful as they were in those days, but you still, if you're out snorkeling and diving, particularly in areas close to the grasses and other things the turtles like to eat, you often get to see them. They have a turtle farm there where they actually raise the turtles for their meat, but they also release several thousand each year to the wild to help replenish the wild population. And they have everything from the really small baby turtles to these slightly larger ones that you can, pick up and hold if you want to. And again, this is from our trip in 2003. To the turtles that this is about the size they are when they harvest them to eat, all the way up to the big turtles that they breed and are the ones that lay their eggs. And they have artificial beaches there next to these tanks, and come laying season, the turtles get to climb up and lay their eggs. One of the exciting things I got to do when I was living in the Cayman Islands is one of the directors of the turtle farm was a member of the church I worked at. And she invited me to come out to see the turtles laying their egg, which was at night after they closed. And she called me, and I got to go, and it was just really exciting to see that. And I got to help harvest the eggs, because once the turtles they're very skittish going up to the beach, but once they start laying their eggs, they're almost in a trance. And so they just take all the eggs out and put them into a hatchery, because they get more of the eggs to hatch. And then they can raise them more carefully from there. And this was always one of my favorite pictures of Stephanie and our kids when they were growing up. So from there, we're flying to hell, literally. This is an area of the island that the early settlers had this very dark, ancient coral that's called iron shore, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And they thought that this must be what hell looked like, so they named it hell. And so now you can visit hell, and you can have a postcard or letters mailed from hell and have a postmark from hell. I always tell people, if they ask, tell me if anybody tells me to go to hell, I can say, I've been there. It's all right. It is hot because it's the tropics, but it's really a tourist trap. And of course, there's several shops where you can buy various t-shirts that play off of the name of hell. Like, I'd rather go to hell than to school for kids, or, I've been through hell and back, things like that. The Cayman Islands have traditionally, and still, particularly for the native Caymanians, have been a very religious people. And so even the people who own this gift shop there in hell want to make sure that you know who Jesus is, and that you don't want to go to heaven, that you don't want to go to hell, you want to go to heaven, and this is the way to do it. So I always thought was kind of an interesting place to put that. So this is all the way on the northwest side. So it's on the north, and this is part of a national park called Barker's National Park. And enjoy going there because not many tourists go there, so you see these more deserted beaches. You also get to see much of the interior part of the island and in the Sound have these mangrove trees, and here you can see some growing along the shore. And mangroves grow in the water, and they become an important place for young fish and other sea life. They also help protect the shoreline from storms and things like that. This is looking the other way, and it's kind of nice to find a place in Cayman to see a deserted beach. You don't see many of those. The Cayman Islands for a long time were boat builders, but also because the island is ringed by a lot of barrier reefs, there are a lot of boat shipwrecks around the Cayman Islands. And while we were walking there, we saw this piece of an old ship. I don't know whether it's a castaway from one being made or from a wreck, but I thought that was kind of interesting just to see it there by the shoreline. So going back through town, now heading toward the south, the other way before the coronavirus that a lot of tourists saw the Cayman Islands were cruise ships. There are lots of cruise ships who stop every day. When I lived there, a busy day, this would be a busy day with 3 cruise ships, maybe 4. Now 3 or 4 cruise ships is a really slow day, and they have up to 7 or 8 cruise ships, which you can imagine some of these huge ones, you're adding 5 to 10 or probably 10 to 20,000 people to the island for the day. So it can get pretty crowded in certain places when the cruise ships are in. And they anchored, at this point, they do not have, the Cayman Islands does not have a dock where the cruise ships can pull up to. My understanding they're working on that. So they anchor offshore, and they have these little tenders, little boats that ferry people back and forth to the ships. Again, this is the west side of the island, so it's a great place for sunsets. As I said earlier, even along here where there's this iron shore, which is ancient coral that's kind of pushed above water, normally is calm, except for when there's storms coming from the west side, which happens on this day. But you can see this little ladder right here. This is a place that normally there are scuba divers and people going out snorkeling can enter the water because there's some really cool coral formations right off of here. But it was a beautiful sunset that night, especially with these waves crashing. And anywhere you're along the western side, usually there's some pretty impressive sunsets. And this is another one from the day where there was a storm. And this is just another view of the cruise ships there in the harbor. And as I said, in 2016, everywhere we went, there were iguanas. One of the other favorite places we like is Smith. I've always called it Smith Cove, but I think its official name is Smith Bracadier, which means cove. And because of the blue iguana, they had the iguana thing like here in Richmond. What did we do in Richmond? They had painted doors and put them up around, and then there was a while I think there were goats that were painted and put around. So they did iguanas. But there's this little swimming beach. It's a great place to get in and swim, and a lot of people do it there. The church I worked at was a Baptist church, or still is a Baptist church. And Baptists, they need to be fully immersed when they do baptisms. But they did not have a baptismal pool in their church. This was their baptismal pool. So this is where Stephanie was baptized, and anybody from that church was baptized. This is another place you can see this iron shore and walk out and kind of get a good view. It's also, because of that, a great place to go snorkeling because there's a lot of coral heads around there. So this is me heading out to snorkel. You can see some fish around. Just some more underwater. This was also a favorite place that I would go for sunsets. And you never know who you'll find. On one of our trips, there was a lady there who said her dog loved to be buried in the sand. So this is her dog there buried in the sand. They also had this, I wouldn't dive, but it was a great jumping off place when you were there doing it. All right. Long ago, before there were cars and roads, the Cayman Islands, even though it's relatively small, had lots of small communities, and often people would not, like for their whole life, may not go between their own community and another. So one of those communities was Prospect. And at Prospect, there had at one time been a small community, and to protect themselves, they had built a fort. But it's just a really beautiful place to go. And during the winter, the sun sets far enough south that this was also a good place. It's on the south side of the island, but looking west, you got some pretty sunsets. This was a trip when we went in the wintertime, and Stephanie, who much prefers warm weather, was quite excited to go out and enjoy the warm weather and the beautiful sunset. And just a few more of those while we're at this site. Stephanie's mom and sister, who lived together, live not too far from Prospect, as does several of her other aunts and uncles. Stephanie's mom is one of, if I remember correctly, one of, it's either 10 or 11. And so this is Stephanie's mom here, and Stephanie, hope you recognize. This is her, Stephanie's Aunt Kay, Stephanie's mom, Zoe's sister Kay, and her husband, Jeff. Jeff, unfortunately, just died this year, but up until just before he died, he had remained very active. And he was either 90 or close to 90 when he died last year. And as far as I know, Kay's still living, and she lives there with her daughter, Mish, Stephanie's cousin. This is Zoe's sister, Novia. Let's see if I remember all the names. I think it's Stacy and Marlene. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 10 or 11 siblings. This was at Kay and Jeff's house, and Jeff loved to garden, as does his daughter Mish. And so they had all these fruit trees and vegetables outside. This is a papaya tree, which always looks weird because papayas grow right on the stalk of the plant. I don't know that these were specifically Jeff and Kay's chickens, because they're like iguanas, chickens are everywhere. And as far as I know, they're not trying to eradicate the chickens, but they are everywhere you go. You see chickens running around. I put this here. I meant to put it. You may see it another place at the end. When shopping, pretty much when you get to food, and I'm going to talk about that later, you can buy most anything you want in the store, but even seafood, but it's almost all of it's imported. And even seafood is imported. And when I was in there, the sign there says fresh Virginia oysters. And while I do enjoy fresh Virginia oysters, I didn't see a point of going all the way to Cayman Islands to have them, because they would not be as fresh as I can get them when I go to the Chesapeake Bay. So one of the other interesting places on the island is Pedro St. James. Pedro St. James is the oldest building on the island. It was built in 1780. It is also the home or former home of Stephanie's grandmother. Stephanie's grandmother's family owned the home for generations, and her grandmother was actually born there. When I lived there in the 80s, it actually had become a dive kind of restaurant and bar that I was told you shouldn't frequent. And I would drive by that to go out to one of my favorite places, I'll show you in a minute. But in the 90s, the government built it, bought it, restored it, and it is now a historic site. You can do tours. And one of Stephanie's uncles, Stacy, works there as a tour guide. And Stephanie's grandmother was Carrie Hurlston, and our daughter Carrie is named after Stephanie's grandmother. And on one of the trips, when our daughter Carrie and her boyfriend went by themselves, they were doing the tour, and Stacy was making a really big deal that his mother's namesake was there, because he does talk about his mom a lot. And I'm going to have to hurry because I have 5 minutes here. So this is why I used to love going there, because this is one of the higher points on the Cayman and Grand Cayman, and it has this bluff, and often the waves are crashing, and it's quite beautiful. I went there to work at this church, the First Baptist Church at Grand Cayman, which is where I met Stephanie. And this was its original location. This is where it was when I was there. After I left, and after the pastor I worked with left, they continued to grow and got so big that they built a brand new, huge building just down the road a little bit. And like many Baptist churches everywhere, and not just here in the States, but around the world, people started not getting along with each other and not agreeing on things. So a big group of people left and formed the Cayman Islands Baptist Church. And many of those who formed the Cayman Island Baptist Church were members of that original First Baptist Church. So this is where Stephanie's mom and brother are members now. And it's a little bit further out of town, but it's very close to the Pedro St. James, which is why I'm showing these. And they had this really cool cross, which I really liked because it's made out of concrete and a local wood called ironwood. So I'm going to talk real fast in the next 4.5 minutes. So Boddentown is one of those little villages that was along the way. And it's known for some pirate caves. That is one of the original tourist traps that was when I was there. I don't have any pictures, digital pictures of that, but there's a nice little restaurant that's open on weekends, serves great fried fish, but has a great place to sit and eat with a beautiful view. And if you want to watch a sunrise, you have to head out to that end of the island. As you keep going to the east end is much less populated than the western side of the island. One of the attractions there are these blowholes. They're holes that have a tunnel out to the sea just naturally, and when waves hit it, it spurts up kind of like a geyser. Also here is the memorial to the wreck of the 10 sails, a famous wreck back in the, I think it was 1700s, where 10 ships ran aground on this reef where you see the waves out here. And the Cayman people went out and saved most of the people from those ships so that there were only a few fatalities, and helped them to salvage as much of the ships as possible. And supposedly there was a member of the royal family there, and the king granted them certain things forever because of saving the royal family. There's also a really nice resort on this end that also does diving that leads from that end of the island. And I think we're going to run out of time. So these I'm going to go real quick. The Queen's Highway I put there, being a British colony, back just before I arrived in '84, the Queen did a visit and dedicated this road, so it's now known as the Queen's Highway. One of the other things that is here in the Cayman Islands that I have not been to, but our daughter Carrie and her boyfriend went to, are these crystal caves that have beautiful formations from the pictures that they shared with us. And one of the places we often try to make it to is Rum Point, the kind of a far northern part of the island, right next to the Sound. Lots of places to relax, a lot of water sports. It was a good place. This is where Stephanie's mom and brother were trying to explain bridge to Stephanie and I, which we weren't very successful at. This is also where a tour where they do a bioluminescence tour, where at night the water just kind of shimmers with bioluminescent plankton that glows when you touch it. So, food. As I said, you can buy most anything you want. Cayman had been part of the colony of Jamaica before Jamaica became independent. So a lot of Jamaican food is there. Jerk chicken is good and very popular. And the best place to get jerk chicken on the island is just this little outside place where there's a man. You may have to wait because he's not very fast, but makes really good jerk chicken. Also, a lot of fruit. Stephanie loves going home so she can see a lot of the fruit that's there. There's the oysters again. The other thing that we all really like are ackee and saltfish and rice and beans, which are very common. And Stephanie loves being able to go out and just pick fresh fruit and eat it. And this is Sven picking a papaya. So just about there. I was going to talk some. In 2004, Stephanie went because there was a hurricane on the island that hit the island, Ivan, that pretty much devastated it. And she wanted to do what she could just to support the people there. So that's a very quick tour, especially the end there. This shows you as we were leaving, flying out, this big area in the middle that is kind of that horseshoe is called North Sound. And you can see here that there's a lot of boats come and go there. And then as you're heading back to Richmond, one of the things that always amazed me is that you fly over Cuba, and you know, being that it's kind of cool to look down on Cuba, being that it's one of the countries closest to us, but because of the embargo, we are not able to visit there very easily. And from there, we fly on back home, and we came back home to Bonaire. I think it was in 2016. When we got home, there had been a thunderstorm that day, a really severe thunderstorm that knocked down this tree in front of our house. And so we had to just walk stuff in and then go park somewhere else until they came and chopped that down the next day. So hopefully we're all still together. It looks like it's given me a little bit more than 40 minutes, which I appreciate. So
Hey, Mike, I just wanted to let you know that something popped up on the screen while you were talking that said you have unlimited time.
Oh, good.
It
Well,
said you had upgraded your account.
Oh, I did. I better check that. I didn't give it a credit card. If anybody that is on this has one, it might be ponying off that, or
I
it
hope
also
not.
may be during this time they're giving us extra time.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. Yeah, it popped up about 10 minutes before it ended.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see that. So good. So I know I ran through especially that last part. So I guess I could go back if there's something somebody wants to see. Does anybody have questions?
I thought I heard somebody talking.
Yeah, you wanted to know what? How did I make it zoom like that? And I'm having a hard time, Larry, understanding what you're saying. How do they make the food? Yeah. So, as I kind of said, they grow some food, but most of it is imported. They bring it in on ships. A few things they may bring by airplane, but most of it comes by ship. But they cook. You know, it's a very for the Caribbean, especially a very affluent island. So the standard of living is very similar to it is here in the United States. So pretty much everybody has a kitchen that would look very similar to, you know, a kitchen you would find in any house here. The one difference is most of the houses there, if I'd known I had more time, I would have mentioned this earlier. Most of the houses there are built from concrete, being that it's in the tropics. There are a lot of insects, and a lot of those insects potentially can, actually potentially they do eat through wood. Also, because it is so humid all the time, because you're surrounded by water, you know, wood tends to rot faster. So it's just more, they also don't have a whole lot of wood. You know, they would have to import all that wood to build things as well, because they don't have a lot of big trees. Most of the houses are made with concrete. They may have some wood finishing, but they're made of concrete. But their kitchens, usually it's a tile floor, and but they have a stove like anywhere here. So that's how they cook.
Mike, are you going to come up and help me?
I can do that later.
Okay.
Any other questions about the Cayman Islands or anything like that? Are there what? Animals?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the one I talked about were the iguanas. The blue iguanas, actually, when I lived there, a friend actually was trying to raise the native blue iguanas, and he got permission to capture one, and I went out and helped him get one from a trap that he had caught. So that was pretty cool. They have, like I said, lots of chickens. They do have wild parrots and a lot of other birds. You see a lot of frigate birds certain times a year, which are a seabird, which is a very large soaring seabird. A lot of other small songbirds that I wouldn't be able to identify. You know, like a lot of places, they do have mice and rats, but they also have, if you can find them kind of out away from where the population is, a rodent called an agouti. It's kind of like a rabbit, kind of is like a cross between a rabbit and something else. But that's native. The name Cayman comes from the Spanish word Cayman, which means alligator or crocodile. There are no crocodiles there now, but they do speculate that at one time there was a crocodile in ancient times. But one of the things I read said that the person who named the island Cayman was probably looking at a blue iguana thinking that it was a crocodile.
Iguanas dangerous? Why are they trying to get rid of them?
The iguanas, I can tell you from experience, they have incredibly sharp claws, because when I helped my friend capture that one just barely brushed against my arm and just kind of got a nice sliced cut there. But they're only dangerous because they eat vegetation. So they are just decimating, you know, a lot of people, while they don't have a lot of commercial things grown there, a lot of people have backyard gardens. They were just like stripping people's gardens bare of any fruit or food that they had. They were climbing power poles and chewing through, and not chewing through, but messing up power lines and causing blackouts. And they were just, I mean, you would drive down, especially early morning or afternoon, and they would just be all over the side of the road, and you would see dead flat ones in the middle of the road. So they were just that, and the concern was that they were going to outcompete the native blue iguana, which is endangered.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was so entertaining.
Oh, well, good. Well, thank you. It was fun. It's always fun. And
I noticed Mike is recording this, so that means we
Yes.
can watch it again later and over. Yeah, I'll share it with all of you if Mike makes it available to me, which I'm sure he will.
I can send it to you or
Yeah.
bring it on some
Good.
other way.
Yeah, it looks like we lost a few. I took a screenshot. I think I got
good.
most of you in. Everybody want me to do one more? Just smile and I'll do one more. Okay. Say cheese.
Cheese.
I see Danny smiling. Both Dannys. Okay.
Well, thank
right,
y'all for
guys.
hanging in there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Ah.